Welcome to the show. This is going to be the first installment of hopefully many. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do with this is put political discourse back into our discussions. We have gone far away from any type of actual dialogue. It's all just talking points. All you hear is this person over here say this talking point repeatedly over and over and over. This person over here saying some other sort of talking point over and over and over and over. And then you just get everybody screaming and yelling at each other. And you don't really have any actual conversations anymore. Well, without conversations, we're never going to find any type of similarities. We're never going to be able to go in there, find out what it is we want over here, what it is we want over here, and then meet somewhere in the middle. And ultimately, we all need to meet in the middle because that's the only way this country is going to progress and move on to any type of sustainability. On this first episode, we're going to have Hunter and we're going to have Trevor. And we're going to give a little bit about our past and how we've gotten to where we personally believe politically. We're going to talk a little bit about some sports. We're going to talk a little bit about discourse in our media. And we're going to talk a little bit about these mask mandates we have.
Start. So my name is Hunter. I live currently in Franklin, Tennessee. I work in the financial services industry. I'm 25 years old, and politically, I identify as libertarian. And at one point in time, I used to be on the left wing of the political spectrum, and I'll dive into how I got from left to libertarian later on. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with everything like that right now. The state of this country, needless to say, like most people, I am not happy with currently, and I don't know. Maybe hopefully there's some way that we can turn the tide. Maybe not, but that's kind of where we're at with everything.
Well, I'm Trevor. I live in Michigan. I am a parts manager at a collision center. I also am a libertarian. More specifically, I'm an anarcho capitalist. I do believe in an anarchist society. How we get there, though, that's a long road. That's nothing where, like, if I could flip a switch and have it right now, the world isn't ready for that. It's a battle of minds. um, I started on the opposite end of the spectrum. Not really because I knew what was going on, but because of where I grew up. A town of about 7,000 people, farming community. I grew up, I guess, kind of a neocon, you could say. I wanted McCain to beat Obama his first time around. In hindsight, I'm really glad he didn't. Not that Obama was great, but I think McCain would have been a disaster. In 2012, Ron Paul kind of woke me up to the ideas of liberty. Um, and from there, I just kind of ran with it. I actually have always been kind of apolitical, and I've never been a voter. I've never thought that voting could really um, accomplish permanent change because you can vote an idea in, but it can be voted out in 4 years. So I've always viewed liberty as a battle of minds and hearts more than a voting booth. But now that I'm a father, I am kind of viewing voting as an act of self defense for myself. So I did register. Actually, on the 4th of July this year, I registered as an independent, not as a libertarian. But I will be voting for Joe Jorgensen, the libertarian nominee.
Awesome. I'm Rich. I am from Lexington, Kentucky, as you can tell. I uh, I was raised in a household with Democrats. So when I left high school, I was a Democrat and I voted for Clinton. But then I kind of watched Al Gore's wife try to stymie Tupac and Dr. Dre and attack their lyrics. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are you guys doing? So it kind of opened my eyes that they aren't truly for freedom, liberty, whatever you want to call it. And I started going away from that mindset. I started looking towards people like Ron Paul. Um, I've actually voted for Rand Paul. I did not want Trump. But it opened my eyes to that. And I don't really have a true political party. I am a registered Republican, but that's mainly for the primaries so that I could vote for who I would like to see have that nomination. But everybody I have voted for in the primaries have lost, and I've ended up with people that I did not vote for. So ever since Clinton, I have actually voted for myself.
Hey, if nobody else can get the job done, vote for yourself. Hell, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I've taken a lot of those little political tests, and a lot of them, when I do take them, that comes out and says I'm more of a classical liberal.
Mhm.
Um, it really just depends on the subject. It depends on what it is we're talking about, on where I fall on that political spectrum. Certain things I'm a classical liberal. Certain things I can align with a libertarian, and then certain things I'm conservative. I just don't claim to be a Republican.
Hey, don't blame me for not claiming it.
yeah.
So, what do you? I hear babies in the background.
Do you? Baby. Oh no. Hold on real quick.
So, how are the twins, anyways?
They're doing good. One of them's being changed right now, and the other one's pissed that she's not the one getting attention. Let me deal with them real quick.
Having kids, I cannot relate.
Yeah, mine are all old now. Not
I- Isn't,
old, but older.
isn't your youngest 13?
Mine are, yeah. My youngest is 13. We were talking about the mask mandate in my household, um, and my youngest blurted out right then and there, "Government can't tell me what to do."
Oh man, that's great.
He's got a point.
Trevor, which one of the twins is that?
This one is Zadie, the younger one.
Oh, she is adorable.
Okay.
Is that the one that wasn't getting attention, or
Yeah, I went and picked her up just because I didn't want her to just keep screaming there.
don't blame you.
Yeah, that's the one who's gonna become a Michigan fan. I already see in her eyes. The other one's gonna become a Michigan State fan.
Oh,
I already said before they were born, one was going to be an Auburn fan and one was going to be a USC fan. It was going to be like a household, like split into fourths. That,
this is gonna.
not that I think
Oh
that's
wow.
actually going to happen, but if it did, that would be. You can make a reality show out of that.
No, that's a cruel joke. We don't want that.
Uh, that's like if one of Rich's kids became, if they aren't already, a Louisville fan.
Oh, really?
Nah, I had one who tried that for 2
Well,
weeks.
your daughter?
Yes, my daughter came home one year and said that she was a Louisville fan because all her friends were Louisville fans. That lasted 2 weeks.
What happened?
I let her know that Louisville is not that good.
I'm sure he probably didn't say it like that, but
Yeah, I'm sure the
No.
words are a little bit more harsh.
yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot more non-YouTube words on there.
Oh man. Yeah, I almost. Trevor knows this. I don't know if you do, because I became a sports fan. I've been a Buccaneers fan since I was younger, but I didn't watch the games as much and everything like I do now with everything. But I really started getting into sports when I was 14, and so I was trying to find a college team. And I wasn't going to pick Mississippi State or Ole Miss because I was born and raised in Mississippi, and no. So I was like, let's see, who could I go with? So USC was one of the choices, and then LSU. It came down between those two, and looking back, I made a very smart decision given the current state of affairs. And really over the course of this past 20 years, because even though USC had like their dynasty in the mid 2000s, LSU's accomplished more this millennium than USC has. So it's, and not to mention just overall, what it's enabled me to do, like the people that I've met down in Louisiana, the fact that it's close to me, or well, not as close as it used to be, but it's all worked out. So it's been pretty good. Plus, USC right now is a complete dumpster fire.
Yeah, they are.
Well, I was born at UK Hospital, so I had to become a Kentucky fan. So it has its plus and minuses. There are certain years where they're decent in football and it's something you can kind of cheer for, but it's a basketball school.
You want this one?
So they have put a lot more into the football program, and you're seeing some sort of resemblance of a football squad. I don't know if it's going to be sustainable, but they'll get a win here and there. I mean, they have beaten number one teams. Louisville never hasn't.
That's kind of we're somewhat of the reverse. Like we're kind of equal with football and baseball, because baseball, as you know, I mean, we were basically a dynasty in the 90s. But football, obviously, we've gotten this millennium, we've gotten to be, I guess you could say, an elite program. Basketball, it's weird because you look at us historically, we're actually a pretty good basketball program. I mean, we're right behind Kentucky in the number of SEC regular season titles. Are we not? Or who's behind? Somebody
I think
Alabama.
For basketball?
Yeah, I know, right?
Then where did I see? Maybe it was, what was it? I'm sorry, maybe I was looking at something else. Anyway, though, I mean, we've been pretty good. We've been to 4 Final Fours, and of our past like 4 or 5 coaches, all of them but one have won the SEC regular season title at least once. Johnny Jones is the one that didn't. Like, love the dude. He's an alumni that went to the school, but coaching wise, it's so weird. Like his first couple of years, he did pretty good with 3-star players, but then once you started bringing in the 4 and the 5 stars, it's like he didn't know what to do with them. And I don't know when Ben Simmons was there, he was a cancer in the locker room. I do not claim Ben Simmons, but like some LSU fans do. But it's just after the Ben Simmons year, where we pretty much heavily underachieved, it just was all downhill from there. And obviously the next year we won. I think we only won 10 games, only got 1 or 2 SEC games. One of those is actually against Tennessee. Yeah, and then after that, since then we got Will Wade, and Will Wade's done a great job, but there's
got a nice checkbook.
Do what now?
He's got a nice checkbook.
Yeah, I mean, look, at this point, as much as the basketball team has infuriated me, I don't care if we've got an offshore account somewhere specifically for them. Like, I mean, in all seriousness, though, I really do hope.
No problem saying I hope Kentucky starts buying all kinds of football players. Everybody else seems to be doing it.
Yeah.
We have the money, so it's not like we don't. We just have only spent it on basketball.
I mean, you don't have to pay the basketball players, because like Cal said, why would I pay them when the very next year they're already going to be getting paid like pretty much 100 times more than what they're making, what they would technically be making at Kentucky. So kind of defeats the purpose. Yeah. I'm like, you got a point.
When it comes to basketball, LSU and Notre Dame are very similar, where they'll have ups and downs. And they're consistent ups and downs. They're not like your Floridas, or where you have a peak and then you drop and then you never see them again. It's kind of like Arkansas. They peaked, dropped, and you've never really seen them ever again. But LSU and Notre Dame, both of you guys do have consistently ups and downs. And
Yeah.
you can't really ask for anything more when it's not your primary sport.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Mike Bray has been there for 20 years now. From like 2005 to 2015, we were pretty solid. I mean, we had back-to-back Elite Eights followed by a Sweet 16. One of the Elite Eights, Kentucky, of course, came back and beat us by what, one was it? That one, that
Yeah,
hurt.
I believe it was one. It was either one or two. It wasn't much.
Yeah, and then these last few years, we've just been horrible. It's like watching a completely different school. It feels like sometimes, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's like that, just over and over. That's the way it's been as long as I can remember Notre Dame basketball.
Hmm.
We're either good or
But
we're
it's
bad.
consistent.
Not much in between. Yeah, it's true. We're either like 500 or we're good.
Uh, that's how that's how it is for football for me.
Yeah,
We either get to a bowl game and we're above 500, or it's just a horrible year.
Yeah, we just
There's
started
no there's literally no in between.
we just started not long ago putting money into the basketball program because for a while, I mean, it was obvious that, I mean, it's still the same way, but that basketball pretty much plays third fiddle to football and baseball here. But we started putting money into, the program. Like, for example, we have the largest video board in college basketball. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was a big deal for me, not because, I mean, the video, I have seen it in person. The video board looks nice, but it's because we're actually investing in it because it's our basketball program has so much potential as to what it could be. I mean, you've seen that over the years. I mean, we've had gone on streaks for years. We can be pretty good, and make a decent run in the NCAA tournament. And then it's just like with Trevor and Notre Dame. It's like then we just go on this drought, and it's you don't know when you're going to get back to being where you are, which is why I'm hoping that Will Wade sticks around because he can be, if he stays here for a while, he can do some really good things. I mean, he's already won us a regular season title once. We made the Sweet 16, and even though he wasn't coaching in that Sweet 16, even if he was, we still would have lost to Michigan State because we didn't have the size to go toe to toe with them that year. But yeah, I'm hoping we can keep it up. I mean, when it comes to me with basketball, I'm cool with winning at least 20 games a year and making the NCAA tournament. I leave my expectations at that, and if we do more, then all the better. But I try to keep it at that minimum expectation. Like with Kentucky
I
and
don't
football,
expect anything.
you just want to go to a bowl game, and that's it. Like just leave it at that.
Sometimes I actually, I, 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 I have no problem admitting, I just want them to win one national championship in football sometime in my life, and I'll be happy. Just one. That's it. I don't need 100 of them. Just one. I mean, I've seen 3 national championships in basketball. I just want to see one in football. If Clemson can do it, why can't Kentucky? Because they were horrible before Dabo got there.
they were.
Join the ACC and get a preacher for a coach. Problem solved.
Well, I've already said I wouldn't mind transferring over to the ACC so that people would quit saying that, well, Kentucky just wins a lot of basketball games because they're in the SEC. Whatever. ACC is only 2 teams. That's it.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you'll get a Louisville and you'll get a Notre Dame, but consistently, it's still only 2 teams.
Yeah, last year was god awful for the ACC. Like I haven't seen the ACC that level. I mean, they weren't terrible, but they weren't what we were accustomed to seeing in the past, and especially North Carolina. Like they only won what, like 10 or 11 games, something like that.
They were really, really bad.
Maybe a little more, but they were
They
not good.
didn't make the tournament.
Yeah.
They weren't going to make the tournament.
No, I'm pretty sure that they were sub 500.
Yeah,
Right? If I
I couldn't
Well,
remember what their record is. It might have been,
almost dead last. They were like way down there.
yeah. I think it was like them and I can't remember who's near the bottom. Them and Boston College maybe near the bottom. I can't remember, but it was North Carolina hasn't been that bad in I think the whole time I've been alive.
Yeah, same.
well, that's because they've academically cheated the whole time you've been alive.
Yeah, true, true. Didn't think about that.
I mean, 18 years of academically cheating, and then nothing. NCAA did absolutely nothing. Come
I
on.
bet you, I bet you all the SMU.
Something that's always bugged me, they literally were having fake classes. Nothing happens. Notre Dame had to vacate the 2012 and 2013 season in football because of a rogue tutor that decided to do four student athletes work for them. And then the tutor was someone who was a student assistant while he was there. And then when he graduated, Brian Kelly wasn't going to keep him on the staff. And that is when he came forward and was like, oh, yeah, well, I've been cheating for these players, blah, blah, blah. And then we have to vacate 2 seasons. One of them was 12-0 season,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I
North
mean,
Carolina went
I
down.
feel I feel very similar that the way they handle certain situations, because you're wearing that Patriot shirt, but Cam Newton got paid 100 and what was it, $80,000, his family,
I want to say something like
when he
that.
was at Auburn, and he got to play for a national championship. Yet Kentucky and Eddie Sutton got caught trying to pay somebody $1,000, and we got the death penalty. Come on,
Yeah,
$1,000, we get the death penalty. Cam Newton got 180, and he gets to play for a national championship. Now, did we end up with Rick Pitino because of it? Yes. In the long run, we've made out, but in the short run, that's a huge difference of how you handle situations.
yeah. There's no consistency with the NCAA.
I remember, and I'm glad you brought that up because I remember their reasoning for why they didn't punish North Carolina with that was because apparently these classes they weren't only restricted to student athletes, that the student body as a whole was able to take these classes. So that was their excuse for, well, because since it was offered to other students it wasn't considered, I don't know if you call it an impermissible benefit, cheating, whatever. I don't know. The NCAA's definitions on things changes all the time, but that was their excuse or loophole per se for not punishing North Carolina. Now it's obvious what was going on. I mean, I think everyone pretty much sees. I mean, even alumni were disgusted by what was going on, but it's yeah, like the inconsistency is insane, and that's what I personally feel like we should do. And I've been saying this for the past few years, and it's it's not like on paper it could use some improvement, but kind of what I was thinking is we get rid of the NCAA and then kind of basically try to find some way for the conferences to come together and maybe police things themselves. Now, I don't know exactly how 100% you go about doing that. Maybe select a representative from each conference and go from there. All I know is what we currently have is inconsistent and it's not working.
Well, my thought on that whole process was, if that's the loophole you were able to use, that some regular students that weren't student athletes were capable of taking those classes, what's the difference between paying somebody who's a student athlete $100,000 to come to school and just randomly giving some other random student $100,000? I mean, that's the precedent you just set.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just pay all of them.
My personal belief is I hate vacating win. To me, the vacating wins thing, it's an insult not only to the players that followed the rules, but to the fans that actually went to those games as well. My personal belief is I don't believe wins should be vacated unless there was something that gave you an on the field advantage at the time of the game, like PEDs or something like that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yes, I agree with that. Like Clemson and getting caught doing PEDs, and Bama getting caught doing them, and Florida, they didn't take games away for those.
Mm-mm.
But Marcus Camby talked to a agent, and you took away UMass's games. Come on, that had absolutely nothing to do with on the court.
Right.
And people
I
haven't let
mean,
Joe Barry forget it ever since.
oh no, oh no, I've had to defend him for that. I'm like, that has absolutely nothing to do with Kentucky. I- All right, we've gotten way off topic, so let's kind of get back on topic. What are your thoughts, Trevor, on the government issuing mask mandates?
I don't really think it's the government should be in the business of mandating things like that. As I said in my introduction, at heart, I mean, I really am an anarchist, and I don't think the government really works in our best interests, like really ever. And I don't trust their experts. They're experts who flip flop every day on different things. Having said that, though, private businesses, I mean, if they want you to wear a mask in there, if they want me to wear a mask in there, then I either need to wear a mask in there or find another place to do business. You know, as far as private property goes, um, anyone should be able to set whatever rules they want on their private property. If I want to say, hey, you can come over to my house, but you can't come in naked, well, then you can't come in naked. The same way as if a store is like, yeah, you can come in and shop here, but there's a pandemic going on, so we want masks, and that's fine. But as far as the government saying you have to enforce these rules on your private property, otherwise, and they actually are doing that here now in Michigan. These stores are expected to enforce that the executive order that they have to wear masks. Otherwise, they can lose their business license. Now that's
Mm.
just ridiculous. Like the state has no there's no reason for them to be able to tell people what they can and cannot do with private property. The same way that they shouldn't be able to tell people what they can and cannot do with their bodies. That's my take on it.
I I agree 100%. Here in Kentucky, my issue with it, besides the government doesn't have the authority to do things like that, is if a company wants to have you wear a mask to come in, I have no problem with that. And if I choose to go in there and shop there, I'll wear a mask. And if I choose not to go there, I'll choose not to go there. My issue is here, they have assigned it to the health department to decide who gets fines. And I something doesn't sit right with that with me, because the health department, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, that gives the health department a lot of power on the guise of safety during for health. And that's a very slippery slope, because the health department can be like, well, we think that obesity is an issue, so we are going to start fining companies that sell cupcakes. We think that there is an issue with too many people getting shot, so we're going to start fining companies that sell weapons. That's a very slippery slope that I don't think the government has the power to even entrust to the health department.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. It's just very overbearing, and it's not the government's role to be doing things like that. The government shouldn't be in healthcare at all, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My whole thoughts on this are and I'm pretty much in line with you guys. Now, I will say I don't think it's something that should be mandated. I think it's something that, if the problem with all this is that it's the statistics and all of this supposed research and like stuff with the experts like Trevor was talking about is everything is so all over the place, and there's not like one simple conclusion or one simple piece of evidence or research or whatever that says that a mask 100% works or 100% doesn't work. And that's just kind of where it is with me, because everything's so all over the place where I can't make a decision on the mask because I haven't seen anything to make me 100% come to a conclusion. Now, to kind of get back on touch with the mandates, my issue with this is that, you know, when you let government into one aspect of the lives of the American people, whether it be their personal lives, their economic lives, and whether it be the lives of businesses, when they go, it's so much easier to let government take something than it is to expect them to give it back. Because once you let them through the front door to something, and I use this phrase frequently, then where do you expect it to stop? Because once they start, it doesn't end. And one example I'll use is and it's a little bit different than kind of the coronavirus from what we're talking about, but I'm going to use Connecticut back in the 90s. It's hard to believe present day, but Connecticut at one point back in the 90s, they didn't have state income tax. And there was a big protest about that on the Capitol grounds. And at the time, it was said that state income tax was only going to be temporary to supposedly fix their budget problems. Fast forward nearly 30 years later, Connecticut is one of the most highly taxed states in regards to income tax, property tax, I mean, you name it. So the state government of Connecticut came in and they enforced an income tax. It's supposed to be temporary. It's still there to this day. And as a result, taxes across the board have been raised. And so many people have left the state because of that, because not only as expensive as it is it difficult to live, but the burden of taxation was just too much for people. So circling back to this whole coronavirus thing, all of these measures are supposed to be temporary, but we don't really know that for sure. So the question is, yeah, I think some of these measures will be scaled back once the government deems it appropriate to return to some form of some normalcy, whenever that is. It's anybody's guess, but how many of these are going to remain? And I mean, nobody can really say, because it's so difficult to try to understand exactly sometimes what the federal government's motives are, because yeah, they may be under the guise of actually caring, but there's usually some underlying motive that's beneath it. I mean, it might be
There
worse than
always is.
so.
There always is. There's it doesn't really matter which party it is, whether it's been Democrats, whether it's been Republicans. They have both parties have done some shady stuff, and then they put in laws or legislations or regulations that are detrimental to the populace, and they don't take them away ever. They have never taken them away.
Yeah, I forget what the
Both
quote is.
parties run around.
Go ahead.
Huh? Both parties run around saying how, oh, this party's this, that party's this, we need to change this. But then when they get to power, they never change it.
Yeah, I forget who said the quote, but when you guys were talking, it made me think of it. Where it was the great. It's like something about like the greatest attacks on liberties are always done in the name of what's good for the people. There's always some grand, greater good that they're acting towards. It's always, oh well, why would you be against that? It's for the good of everyone. That's what's but it always there's
Hmm.
always something in the back door. There's always something.
Hmm. So I think we all have the same mindset for these mask mandates. Now, me personally, I don't, I honestly, I don't care if the government was to utilize taxpayers' funding to come up with PSAs through the health department, through public broadcasting like PBR and NPR, um, to more or less convince people to wear a mask. I I have yet to actually see any data that's inconclusive that it works 4 months after the fact. But if that's what they want to go towards to in order to eliminate it, it is just a mask. I just have an issue with the government telling me I have to do it, and that's where
Yeah.
my issue lies.
Yeah, I have no problem with government saying, hey, here's a health expert, this is what they recommend, and they say, hey, so we should wear a mask just in case you have it, you're not spraying it out over stuff. Yeah, it's not 100% effective, but at least it's catching your spit and stuff like that. But that's completely different from the government saying, okay, if we see you without a mask in a public space, you're fined $500 and the business you're in is losing their license, which is that's the current order here in Michigan. If I were to go into Speedway here next to my house to get a Gatorade, if I don't wear a mask and they allow me in and allow me to do business and we are seen, they will lose their business license and I'm fined $500. And it's not considered a civil infraction. It's actually a misdemeanor. It goes on your record here under this current executive order, which just blows my mind. Um, but I guess finding people $500 is, that's all going to keep me healthier, I guess, in some sort
Wow.
of weird
See,
way.
here it's just more or less a civil fine. But wow, that's
Extreme.
Yeah, yeah. It was just last
yeah,
week.
that's a
The new executive order came through, and it's now a misdemeanor, $500.
mm-mm-mm. See, I'd be right there. I'd be protesting your all's governor.
There's certainly been a lot of protests. I'm
Wow.
sure when all the protests started, you guys remember Michigan was one of the ones that had one of the really big ones right away.
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. They and all the mainstream media were sitting out there saying that they were only protesting just to get a haircut.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot
It's
more
funny.
than
It's funny how they
just to
can
get a
drive that.
haircut.
Yeah, it's funny how they can drive a narrative like that when it was not about a haircut. But actually, that's why I wear this. I haven't had a haircut since before this all started, so I got long ass mullet going on. But yeah, no, that's what's so funny about it. I mean, they're shutting down people's businesses. People are out there protesting. My business is going under. I'm losing this. I'm losing that. And CNN or the likes of that type of media comes along with their camera. Oh, they're mad about haircuts. What? This is not about haircuts. This has never been
No,
about haircuts.
The one
I
thing that
never understood that. I never really understood that mindset of mainstream media, no matter who it is, um, going down to that of a finite conversation, because that's never what it is. It's never, it's just a haircut. There's a lot more factors behind why people want to go back to work.
Well, it just
There's a lot more
you can keep going.
there's a lot more to our economy than just, "Hey, I want a haircut." Come on.
Right, and when they do it, it just totally plays into the identity politics that are dominating all of mainstream politics these days too. Usually it was the left outlets, media outlets that are like, oh, see a haircut, and then so everyone on the left they get to play their whole superior intellect card. Oh, you see these stupid people, they care this much about a haircut, blah, blah, blah. And then the same thing happens with the right, but that's just a very easy, open example of how it happens with the left. And that's
Hmm.
really honestly how identity politics got to where they are. Is it's completely media fueled, in my opinion. It's it's regardless of what side they're on. We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. They're stupid. They don't understand. That's how both sides look at it, and that is the biggest reason why no one can have conversations anymore with someone who doesn't agree with them on every single issue. And on the right side, I mean, look at what it is with the whole you could be a Trump supporter, but if you divert a little bit off of what he is, well, then according to his followers, if you don't believe every single thing, well, now you're just a never Trumper. You're just a never Trumper. That's why you don't agree on this one issue. Both sides do it.
Yes. I get a lot of flack from both sides. A lot of it's because there have been times where I've had to stand up for what Trump is doing, mainly because I really like how he's trolling the media. I love that. We needed somebody to do that. But I get a lot of flack from the left and the right because I don't fall into either far extreme. I am one of those middle people. I'm not a fence sitter. I do have my compass for certain factors. At the same time, I'm an atheist, so I don't really believe in this culture that Christianity or any type of religion should be predicated into laws and legislation. So I get a lot of flack from the extreme right, and then I get a lot of flack from the commies on the left when I call them commies.
Yeah, that kind of this all ties in and reminds me when we're talking about like how the left and the right are pretty much the same. And you guys already know that I was born and raised in Mississippi, and I was raised in, I guess you could call it a red dog Democrat household, which is basically a conservative Democrat or Southern Democrat, I guess, kind of however you want to phrase it. Which those types of Democrats are slow. They're dying out, as it seems, because there's definitely not as many of those 10 years ago, now as there was 10 years ago, because a lot of them, especially in the local counties down in the South, I'm veering off a little bit, but in the South, like a lot of even though most of your state elected officials have been Republicans for a while, most of your county officials have been Democrats. Well, in my old county I used to live in, a lot of the county elected officials have switched to the Republican Party, but the way everything's going. But to kind of get back to where I was, so I was raised in a red dog Democrat household, basically, and I eventually, I was a hardcore liberal, and at one point in time, I identified as a Democratic Socialist, and I was living in deep red conservative Mississippi. And conservatives always love to play the whole liberals are snowflakes card. They get offended over everything. They can't handle the opinions of others. For me, always being around people that didn't agree with me, I got used to people not seeing things the way I did very quickly. And it helped me to learn to understand why I believe the things I want to believe and question myself frequently so I can fully understand and articulate to someone else. Because if you don't understand why you believe what you believe, how can you expect to explain it to somebody else? But basically, to get back to my whole point is that I have seen people on the right throughout all this, for the whole flag change type deal, for example. I'm in Mississippi, which I have no problem with personally for reasons of my own, but they're losing their minds about it, saying their heritage is under attack and all this other stuff, and that their freedoms are under attack, and they're just going on a tear with all this. Meanwhile, and I've hammered this point home so much, Roger Wicker and Cindy Hyde-Smith, who she is going to win re-election by such a wide margin, and it's so disappointing, even though the Democratic challenger is not that great either. Still, I cannot stand her. Anyway, they voted not long ago to basically allow the FBI to search your internet history without a warrant. And nobody said a word about that. Then this flag nonsense is going on, and everybody is all of a sudden acting like they're concerned about their freedoms and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, okay, so are you really concerned about your freedom, or are you just are you just picking something to be pissed off about? Or are you just letting your emotions control everything? Because if you're actually concerned about your freedom, what they voted for is a lot more important than the flag. Because guess what? I don't care what you slap on the Mississippi state flag. It's not going to change the current status of how the state's doing. It's not going to change the poverty rate. It's not going to bring jobs to the state. It's not going to change the backwards racial tensions that are always going on down there, and there still is, regardless of what people tried to tell me. I lived there for 22 years. I know, but it's it's just insane. And the way that they attack the left their for their behavior with everything, it just boggles my mind because they really aren't that much different. Now, not all conservatives are like that. I completely get that. Just like not all liberals are the ones that you see on Facebook, threatening to report somebody to their employer. But it's just everything now. There's just not much logic with anything anymore. And there's not much actually willing to listen to somebody else. And that's why we are where we are because, I mean, could you imagine if businesses, small and corporations were ran the way we interact with each other in society, everything would fall apart because there has to be some form of compromise, whether you like it or not, in order for things to run efficiently. Otherwise, everybody's at each other's throats and we get nothing done.
Yeah. I mean, we used to have compromise within our political discourse. And for some reason, it's just gone pure outraged feelings. And I don't understand that. And I've been on this planet for 43 years. So I've seen the extreme from both sides most of my life. And I don't understand why we went so far away from being able to compromise.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been on the earth now for 29 years, but and I don't even really know when it started. It just kind of I mean, maybe it was just kind of something I realized as I got older and started paying attention more to politics. But for as long as I can remember, it never seemed like it was that polarized. Where we're over here, they're evil, we don't like them, we're not compromising with them. Everything they want is evil. And I don't really know where it started. I mean, it probably started long before it, but I want to say, and this is not to say it was Obama's fault. I wonder if it kind of started with when Obama was voted into office, kind of on the right side, where they were all, well, he's a Muslim and he's this, he's that. That's kind of, at least in my very short
Well,
life, mind you, that kind of where I first saw it being like people start not liking a politician because of, well, this is me, this is how I am, this is how I feel.
Me too.
well,
That's what I
they
think.
they they were doing that with Bush too. There was that far polarity of he's Nazi, he's Hitler. I mean, the same stuff you see for Trump, they did with
They're all
Bush.
Hitler, right?
So it wasn't just, it didn't begin with Obama. It exasperated further with
Right.
Obama, but it
Yeah.
didn't begin with him. I don't remember there being that far of a discourse when Clinton was in office, but I was a lot younger. Um, I don't. There wasn't this social media platforms that we have now. There wasn't this anonymity of being able to just make fake accounts and just say whatever you want to spew out there into the internet. So I, I don't know. There wasn't any outright extremism in the mainstream media when Clinton was in office. And I did see it with Bush. I did see it with Obama, and now I'm seeing it with Trump. So I don't know when it began or how it began, but I know it's been there for a while.
Yeah, and it just seems to get worse and worse every election cycle. Like the left, I mean, they honestly, I think they rightfully accuse it, in my opinion, of Donald Trump. Sometimes playing to the fringe, not necessarily in the way that he's like, "Hey,
Mhm.
white power," but he totally does. I mean, there's things that he purposefully won't say or won't disavow and stuff. And I think honestly, even though the left is saying, "Well, that's empowering," the far right, it kind of empowers the far left in itself too, because now they have something to point at and say, look at, you see, this is the boogeyman, this is what's happening, so you need to come far left with us. It kind of, they both grow together. They both seem to grow
Well,
together. It doesn't seem like one just takes off and then the other comes out. It seems like it's almost like a back and forth widening of the left and right.
well, yes. There have been times where Trump has outright denounced things, and mainstream media just ignores it. And you can find them in YouTube clips. You can find them in things like that of him just outright denouncing things. At the same time, there have been instances where someone on the left outright denounced stuff and mainstream media didn't pick it up either.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
I'm
how do
not
you
really
feel?
sure.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure if it's a real extreme issue with our politics, or if it's an extreme issue with just how the material is getting relayed to the people.
I think it's a
I
mix of that.
think I think personally, and it's kind of touching on what Trevor spoke about earlier, how I'm kind of with him where I started seeing the extremism, which granted at the time I was only 13 years old when Obama got elected, and I actually was an Obama supporter. We can just use my youth as an excuse, but as that's when I started seeing some of that too. Because I mean, I kind of remember the Kerry Bush election 2004, which was kind of sort of uneventful. I mean, I was only 9, so I mean, I probably who knows, but that's kind of when I saw it because that was at the time in '08 because that was at the time when social media was starting to, I guess, blossom and slowly grow. And social media has not only condensed how big we see our country, but it condenses how big we see the world. Because, I mean, prior to social media, it's, people were pretty much kind of confined within their own space and they weren't exactly interacting with somebody out in, if you lived in Mississippi, you weren't always interacting with somebody from California, or if you were in, New York, you weren't exactly always interacting with someone from Georgia. So social media has exposed us to so many different types of people with different thought processes that we do, and people from all sorts of different backgrounds. And there are a lot of people that aren't exactly have been used to all that exposure. So they're exposed to all these different views and and all these different personalities. And so some people handle it well, some people don't. And social media, and this is a good or a bad thing, it empowers people to basically kind of promote what they think and give themselves to kind of push their own thoughts and agendas out there. And we've seen that can be both good and bad. So, and as a result, people have started, I don't want to say they've taken more of an interest in politics, but it definitely impacts the way that they see things. And Rich, what you're talking about, that ties in with how information is spread as well. So that's just to me social media I think it's not the only factor of why we are where we are, but it's definitely one of the biggest factors.
Yeah, I can see that. For me, it's it's hard because I've seen both spectrums because of my age. I've seen it with an environment without all this social media, um, which kind of helped me have a distrust of the government because I've watched them lie to us pretty much my whole life. Uh, and they've not changed. And I kind of think they've gotten a lot worse. They've never held themselves accountable. Um, Yet they expect us to hold ourselves accountable, and it's like
They don't have to hold
Yeah,
themselves.
I don't agree.
They're guaranteed funding through money that they steal from us. So I mean, there's no
Well,
incentive for them to do a good job.
Or
it,
print out of thin air.
it's the only group of people that I know that can vote to give themselves their own raise and hire the people who audit them.
Yeah, that's kind of where my anarchist roots are at in terms of my view of government. Which I've heard a lot of people say that anarchy is it's a utopian dream or whatever. Which I mean I can kind of understand that accusation. But a quote, I forget who said it, but I really love the quote. It's he who would put all the power in the hands of government and then say limit yourself is the true utopian. Kind of like that because I mean we do we put these people in charge and give them authority over our lives, and then we're shocked when they don't limit themselves. Well, why would they?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you've over the years allowed them to just whatever power they want to give to themselves simply because they're elected, and you don't hold them to a standard and you don't hold their feet to the fire, they're not going to change. They're just going to get worse. And elections, they don't really mean anything because we're not doing broad sweeps of changes when we change to electorate. It just doesn't occur. You can put somebody in there and they can have all the greatest ideas in the world. Let's take your girl, Joe. You put her in charge. She has a lot of good ideas, and I'm not going to say she doesn't. I've been paying a lot more attention to her since you pointed her out to me. But if you put her in charge, she's not going to have as many broad sweeping changes as she wants because you've not changed the electorate underneath her.
Correct, correct. And this is something that she and her running mate Spike Cohen has spoke out about a lot, where a lot of people in libertarian circles, or when she's doing town halls, they ask her, well, what are you going to do about this or about this? And every time she says, what I would try to do is this, but what you need to understand is that as an executive on the federal government, I only can do so much. A lot of this, I need other branches. I need us to get other libertarians voted into Congress. I need libertarian senators. We need to do this. This is not just me in one election. That's not going to be enough. Sure, I can do this, and this, but for real change that's going to last, it's going to take a lot more than that, which I
Hmm.
really like that she's so open about it because, I mean, how many politicians, Bernie Sanders, for example, who come up promise you the moon, the sun, and the stars all in at the same time, and this is what we're doing. We're doing it all. We're going to do it all. So I really, really respect that a lot about her is that she's very open with, all right, well, yes, I do want to, solve this issue, but you need to understand that this is not something that I can solve alone.
Yes. And I mean, that'd be probably an hour long topic in itself. But that's my whole thing about the whole libertarian party. I'd like to see them build up something somewhere in America to show everybody where how their legislation would work.
Right. Yeah, that's another part that I've really liked about her campaign is that her and Spike have both really focused on down ballot candidates. They're promoting, I don't know if you follow either their pages or Twitters or anything, but they've been promoting down ballot candidates just as much as each other and themselves, which I think is great because that's really what needs to happen. We need, localities need libertarian officials, states do. It can't just be the federal government because if like even if we could just vote libertarians into the federal government and try to go about change that way, well, that's completely counterproductive and counterintuitive to what libertarianism is. We don't want an all-powerful federal government that just orders everyone around. You have to put it in localities, otherwise we're just hypocrites.
Well, then you're completely ignoring how this whole country was set up. The federal government was never even designed to be a be all end all. It just never was. I have been a huge proponent of local elections is where it needs to be at, no matter what party it is. I honestly think that a all Democrat, all Republican, even an all libertarian form of government leads to issues. It's just always that's how it is. I mean, look at Baltimore. Baltimore is pretty much 100% Democrat, and it's completely fallen apart. Mississippi, almost 100. I think it's what 96% Republican down there. I
Uh,
think there's just a couple mayors that are Democrat.
yeah. So the only blue parts of the state are the Delta, which is predominantly African
Mhm.
American, and then Jackson, the state capital, and the biggest city in the state. Those are really the only blue parts of the state. Other than that, it's pretty much every other part of the state is red. So yeah.
Yeah, and nothing. You can't just be one party. You can't rule from just one party, no matter what that party is. You have to have discourse. You have to be able to compromise, period.
And one thing touching on that, and this is just it kind of goes to a bigger point I've thought about. I've been saying for a while that it's going to take Mississippi getting a Democratic governor for things to improve. Not because I think a Democratic governor would do a good job, but because that's the only way that people in the state would actually pay attention. Because people tend to pay more attention to the issues when there's somebody in office that they don't like. And because if their guys and their party is in power, well, everything must just be perfect. Everything they do is for our benefit. Nothing is going wrong. So, and that's definitely, not the case in Mississippi. I mean, it's, as I talked about earlier, high poverty rate, job market's terrible, et cetera, education's awful. I could go on and on. But so if they ever got a Democratic governor in place, these pretty much, since the majority of the state is Republicans, then people would start paying attention to the issues. Now, does that mean that their solutions would be good for the state based on how I know people are down there? No, but it just kind of goes, and that's kind of where we are as a society. Is it's that people only want to pay attention to our problems when somebody that they dislike is in a position of power because it it's unfortunate, but um, you know, having an enemy is something that empowers a lot of people and at every walk of life in our country. And that's, I think, another issue that we have in terms of like with Trump being in office. It's that I think Trump's an idiot, but people treat Trump like he's responsible for all of the problems that we have. And I mean, so many of these problems that we have, like, I mean, the deficit, our education system, our overseas wars we're involved in, those are things that have been going on long before Trump got into office. So that's kind of really by me comparing that to what's going on with Trump, it's pretty similar.
Well,
Yeah.
you have two things in that. One, a lot of people vote for their guy, and when their guy wins, they feel safe. So they stop watching and paying attention, and then they go on about their daily life. And they don't take notice again until it physically affects them. That's it's just so wrong within our society to live like that. And I'm not saying to go out and just pay attention to every single political thing and watch every single news article that comes out or something like that, but you got to pay attention to something. You don't have to be a diehard political pundit, you don't have to be a diehard political advocate, but you got to pay attention to more than just what's happening in my immediate life. At the same time, we have a bunch of people who are me, me, me. I only care about me. So they don't care that it's affecting somebody down the road. It's not affecting me. I'm cool. I don't know how society got to that point. And the only time that you see society change from that is when we do have something majorly happen, like 9/11, Katrina. Then you see everybody come together, work together, and then as soon as the problem's kind of dissipating, they go right back to being all about themselves.
That's how it is with school shootings as well. It's like every time there's a school shooting, and it's typically a kid. And I'm not going to get into the whole some people think the school shootings are false flags, but typically the school shooter is a kid that he's been bullied. Um, is mistreated at home. Yeah, overall didn't have that great of a life, and so he goes out and he does his thing, and typically it winds up with the school shooter committing suicide. And then it's like society comes together and is like, what can we do better as a society to treat each other better as humans so we can prevent this from happening? And that lasts for happening again, and that lasts for like probably about a good 2-3 weeks, maybe longer in some cases, like the high school shooting in Florida, which that was mostly because that David Hogg kid was being put up on a pedestal as a advocate for gun control. But after that period goes off, nobody cares about bullying or how we treat each other. And then when it happens again, it's just we do the same thing, and the cycle just repeats.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, it's funny that you mentioned David Hogg because now that I think about it, it's not even just like a right. The right doesn't care about it anymore, or anything like that. Like the left either. They're what? He's just gone. I haven't heard about him in forever. For
Me
forever,
either.
they were
Well,
plastering him all over everything for a while, and then he's just gone. It's just kind
yeah,
of funny
that's
how
because
they stopped
that,
caring.
well, I don't know if it stopped caring or if it's just mainstream media is using other fear tactics at the moment. And as soon as something pops up, they'll throw another person out there, whether it be him, whether it be someone else. And I don't go into the extreme that they're all false flags. I'm not an Alex Jones person.
Mm.
That dude's insane and way out there.
So you
Um,
don't believe there are wizards in temples doing drugs, looking into crystal balls?
no,
Or the
He's
gateway
literally
drug.
said that
no.
on Joe Rogan's show before.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't think there's lizard people either. So I don't believe we've been to the moon though.
No, I don't
That's a
either.
whole
Actually,
nother topic.
I actually don't either. Yeah.
Yeah, that one there. That's always amazed me because supposedly we went to the moon in the 60s when computers were the size of buildings.
Yeah.
Now we have computers in our pockets and we still can't just jump in a ship and go to the moon.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with that.
There's also the Van Allen bits, but yeah, I could get going way too far into
Yeah, I
that.
know. But yeah, they that's my biggest problem with mainstream media is they opportunists. They use whatever feelings or outrage of the moment and they just hammer you with it. And in the meantime, they're not talking about real news that's occurring. Kind of like that whole signing off on the FBI being able to go dig through your browser. That's not newsworthy. None of them, not a single one of them, had any week-long shows. None of the mainstream, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, none of them did.
It was a bipartisan effort, really, if you go back and look at the voting. So neither side, so
I
really
know,
not one side could be totally blamed for it.
I know,
It always seems
but
the
still, the mainstream media did
bipartisan.
not talk about it.
Yeah, true. And whenever I hear bipartisan, it always worries me. Like, it always seems to be something more evil when they agree than if it was just one of them.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, when it comes to election night, I see one of two things going. I see either Joe taking enough votes from both of them to actually win, and then them breaking open a third party, which I go for it. I could care less at this point. Or she's going to pull enough votes away from Biden and Trump's going to win. I think it's going to be really hard for Biden to win. They've got, with him not campaigning, he's going to lose a lot of his voters who are just going to believe in the polls that he's just going to win. It's kind of like what they did with Hillary.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that for the Democrats and the far left doesn't seem to realize this, is that the reason is that they're not fielding any, they're not all their best candidates. They didn't even give a chance. Like Tulsi, in my opinion, was their best candidate that they had running. And if she would have gotten the nomination,
Oh
she
yeah, he
would
was
have
good.
Trump beat by now. But rather than, I mean, plus to me, she's a woman, she's young, and she has pretty good ideas. Now, yeah, there are some things I disagree with her on, but in terms of what I'd like to see out of a president, she, to me, out of all the Democratic candidates that were fielded, seemed to be the most presidential, if that's even still a thing we use anymore with Trump and his Twitter tantrums. But yeah, that's what I would hope to. That's what I was hoping for. I mean, she didn't even come close. Instead, it was Biden, Sanders. I think Elizabeth Warren was right behind Bernie Sanders. I can't remember. So it's just it's crazy, and that's why we are where we are. I mean, we have Trump, who I don't think he's the Antichrist that the left thinks he does, but he's also not great. And then we have Joe Biden, who has had a hand in so much of why our country is where it is today.
That's my issue with Biden is you created a lot of everything that everybody's protesting against. You created it. You co-authored it. You were so adamantly in on the Senate floor arguing for all the stuff that everybody's complaining about. You don't get the opportunity to fix your problem. You created that problem. There's no reason out of 360 million people in this country that we need to elect somebody who helped create the mess that we have right now.
Yeah, who hasn't even said
Uh,
that he regrets the '90s crime bill either. He recently bragged about drafting it. They asked him about it, and he was like, "Well, yeah, I know it. I drafted it." Like, okay, we don't like that.
I mean, I from an aspect, yes, I don't like Trump. I didn't like Trump. I was a Rand Paul person. I voted for him. That's who I wanted because he will actually tell you why he's not voting for something. And he'll tell you what you need to correct in order to get it passed. You want my vote? Fix this. I ain't got a problem with that. That's how a politician should be. My thing about Trump is I think he might be the right person at this particular point in moment to create that space needed to fix the issues we have with our next person, whoever that person would be, to get us back to liberty. I don't like the way he speaks. He's from New York. I don't like a lot of how that's just how they talk in New York. I've been there several times. That's how they talk. Um, yeah, it ain't presidential at all. But the way he is going after the big tech, and the way he's going after how our media talks, somebody had to do it. And if that's all that we're going to get out from him being the president, then that's what we need in order to get to true dialogue again. Because we really haven't had true dialogue within our discourse since JFK. That's a long time.
Yeah, as far as him going after big tech, I think he's done it the wrong way, though. Being a libertarian and someone who hates regulations and such, rather than trying to, oh, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this, a free market solution makes the most sense to me. I don't know if you guys have heard of Parler. A lot of conservatives are moving to that because they don't censor anything. So I recently made a Parler account. The perfect solution for him would be to come out and say, well, Twitter and Facebook, they keep censoring me, they're treating me unfairly. So over the next 6 months, I'm going to be phasing these out. I'm going to be going strictly to Parler. And then, start using Parler regularly. And rather than posting on Twitter or Facebook, post the links to your Parler posts. Use the market against them.
Mm-hmm.
All of his followers would follow him. You don't have to regulate anything. You don't have to ban anything. You don't have to force private companies to do anything, which I know you can argue if they're public or private anymore with how big they are. But really, that seems like a no-brainer solution to me. But I guess him, in all of his stable geniusness, never thought of it.
Well, I agree of using the free market in order to fix certain things. Now, at the same time, how they're going about it, yeah, it's a little bit too much from an authoritative aspect of the federal government. But what he's trying to go for, I think, needs to be set in the place. They need to decide how they're set up. Are they a platform, or are they wow. I, it's right there.
Are they a public platform or a private entity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I
Yes.
agree, because they do walk.
I mean, because ultimately, yes, and they seem to be walking that line and bouncing back and forth over that line whenever they choose to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, come on, you can't be doing that. So the extreme that they're going towards simply because it's Trump, that's a little extreme, but it does need to occur, if that makes any sense.
My biggest problem, and I agree with you guys in regards to that, because especially with the way that like this whole ordeal with Apple has gone. Now, I'm not, or back when they were Apple, when they didn't want to basically, what was it? They didn't want to mess with their security software for the federal government, or something along those lines. And I remember, I can't exactly remember what it was. You know what I'm talking about, but yeah, something where, because Apple software is different from Android. Theirs is more of a secure type of software, and they didn't exactly want to assist the federal government, and the federal government basically was so adamant about wanting them to do it. And I think either they eventually did or didn't. It wasn't something that was it was like news all over the place, but it was something that if you definitely follow libertarian pages, you saw. The details escape me right at this particular point in time, but I'll probably remember it later. But my number one, some of my issues that I've had with Trump is, for example, when George Floyd was killed and all those riots and everything were going on in Minnesota, that was his opportunity to step up as a leader and basically say, this tragedy that happened in Minnesota was tragic. I am heartbroken for George Floyd's family. Together, we will come together as Americans and we will overcome this. He didn't do that. The first thing he did was he attacked the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota and everybody else that was associated, every pretty much government official that was affiliated in that general region, for all being Democrats. So right then and there, his first statement after a huge, ordeal such as that was to come out and say something that was already politically divisive, and which is something we don't need more of. I mean, we're pretty good enough at doing that ourselves on social media. And it's one thing if a congressman had said it, but this is the president of the United States coming out and doing this. And then it's just the way that he's handled all of that, that he handled all that was just to me disastrous. And then the other thing I didn't like is when he called Thomas Massey out for wanting to, holding off on the coronavirus bill when it was in the House. He's like, wait, hold up. Is this actually going to what, it's supposed to be intended for? And most of the money, as we know, is not. And Trump jumped him for it. And I'm like, so you're jumping a congressman for doing his job. Like, if more congressmen did what Thomas Massey did, we might be able to cut down on spending some, which we haven't really done much of since Trump's taken office. It really hasn't slowed down. The deficit is still climbing, which my personal belief is it doesn't matter who's going to be president. Like every presidential candidate's going to tell us their job is going to be to lower the deficit. That's not happening. I've already accepted that because Obama said the same thing, and it's not going to change. But that's kind of, and of course, go ahead.
That's been going up since Reagan.
Yeah.
There's not been going down. It's been a steady climb since Reagan.
It is. I think it's worth noting, though, that Donald Trump ran on ending the deficit, and he has actually been the worst president for a deficit so far, and is on pace. For, I think it's over 5 years. He's going to completely overtake both of Obama's terms. The deficit, he just doesn't care about it now that he's in. He's like, we're just doing this, and it's going to have some really disastrous consequences. The deficit, mix that in with, what was it, $3 trillion that they just printed when all the coronavirus stuff started, because apparently, fake money being printed, just paper, apparently that's going to fix everything. Like, I'm seriously worried to see what kind of monetary situation the United States is in about 10 years from now.
It's going to be very bad. And it's only steadily been getting worse since they took us off the gold standard. The second, I mean, it's just a bunch of zeros and ones in the air. That's all it is.
Yeah.
There's nothing backing it.
Right.
I mean, there's no land backing it. There's no minerals. There's nothing. It's just a bunch of zeros and ones.
Yeah. I mean, really the only thing.
Why don't you just give all of us $1 billion each?
Really, though, that's the logic. Like, why not?
I mean, that's what boggles my mind when I talk to some of these extreme leftists that are like, a living wage. Well, the government just prints money, so just give everybody a bunch of money. Problem solved.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show that they've never really looked at monetary policy or anything like that.
I mean, I saw this thing a few years back on social media, and I'm like, when you put it this particular way, it's like mind blowing. Everybody on the planet supposedly owes all this money, but who does the planet owe the money to? The moon?
Yeah, I remember seeing that meme. Yeah.
Me too.
Yep, that's the problem with central banks.
Maybe Alex Jones is onto something. I mean, maybe there's some people on some other planet that the government is in cahoots with, and we just don't know about it. Maybe that's who we're borrowing money from. Maybe China is just a scapegoat.
Yeah, we owe the wizards that are getting high.
There's a lot of things in China that I do not agree with at all. But there is one thing that I really do agree with. I just don't agree with how they handle it and what they do once they've acquired it. They don't give money away. Mm-hmm. They buy things from other countries. Now, when you go one step further, and instead of saying, hey, I want to buy you want this money? Cool. I want this mine of diamonds over here. Now they go one step further and then they sit there and they don't utilize the people that are there and help bring that market up. They start bringing in Chinese people to do all the work. Yeah, you've gone too far with that. But they don't just give other countries money. And we seem to give all these countries all this money as if the United States owes the world. And we don't owe them anything.
Right. Yeah, that's actually both those things that we just touched on with no gold standard and foreign aid. Those are actually two of the biggest reasons that I woke up to Ron Paul's message because he wanted to repeal 1913. So in 1913, we introduced the income tax and created the Federal Reserve, which is no longer gold backed. And he also wanted to end foreign aid completely. He said, we're going to do it fairly. We're going to end it to everyone, which I was on board with. I was like, yeah,
Hmm.
dude, we got enough fucking problems. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's ultimately why Rand Paul got pushed down in the last election or the last Republican nomination
Yeah.
was because one of his stance is to stop paying all these other countries, including Israel. And as soon as he said that Israel was not a part of it, they immediately started less and less on the debates, and you started seeing more Trump and more Jeb Bush.
Yep. I remember that. I remember as soon as he said that, when they asked him, they said, would you cut it to Israel? And he said, yep. And then after that, he just got blackballed.
I,
Yeah.
I agree with him. We need to cut them all off.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm,
Israel
I'm
is a
tired of
wealthy country.
I'm tired of us trying to build up. We go to stupid wars for no reason, and then we build up their infrastructure. Then we put a base there, and then we just start giving taxpayers money to them. Well, I know several people right down the road that need help. Why can't we help them? But we can help some other country? Come on.
Right. Yeah. All foreign aid is you're taking money from poor people in this country and giving it to rich people in other countries, which that is a Ron Paul 2012 quote. He really
Yeah.
woke me up a lot. He really did. That's who I credit most. I've gone further, a little bit further towards liberty, I think, than Ron Paul, but his message really resounded well with a lot of people. I mean,
Mine was mine was Ross Perot.
was it? I'm not old enough to remember him.
Yeah, I'm not. That
Yeah, I started
he ran
listening.
in what, 92?
I was
Yeah,
one.
Oh
I
yeah.
was in I was in high school and I'm sitting there going, all right, all right, all right. And then in 96 was my first year I was allowed to vote, and I still voted for Clinton and Gore.
I was a year old, so I
Yeah.
couldn't vote at the time. But yeah, my
That out of all my votes, it's the one I regret the most because ever since then I have voted for myself.
my my journey to libertarianism is actually an interesting one. So I told you, of course, at one point I grew up in a Democratic household, and then at one point I was liberal and I kind of identified as a Democratic socialist for a while. It's kind of weird how I started to think when it came to it, because so I used to be a huge proponent of universal health care. Um, Back in my early teen years, because on paper it makes sense, because why wouldn't you want everybody to have health care? And I used to think that people that didn't want universal health care were selfish and only cared about the medical companies getting rich. Then when I actually started to listen to people's reasoning as to why universal health care was not such a great idea, and I used to watch MSNBC religiously. Like, that was a nightly thing for me. Like, here I am, this 14-year-old in high school who spends his nights watching MSNBC. Like, I was a rare one. Anyway, um, but when I listen to their reasoning about how, government can pretty much mandate to people, what doctors they can and can't see, and how you're only restricted to that type of medical insurance, as opposed to where in a legit free market system, you have multiple providers and multiple doctors to see, which you'd still have multiple doctors, you just may not be able to see the same ones. It's more diversified, and also as a result, it drives up the costs. And that even countries like France that do have a universal healthcare system and have way less people than we do, they've racked up a huge deficit as a result when it comes to healthcare. The other thing was, so I was 15 and I went to me, my mom, and my grandfather took a trip to Atlanta the summer of 2010. And I grew up in the country my entire life, but I've always I loved big cities more than I do the countryside, which is why I now live in a metro area and I'm moving to a metro area later. And I love downtown areas because it's just I don't know, like I just love seeing the architecture of places. I love seeing the buildings lit up at night, all this other stuff. And it just, to me, it's just so amazing and just seeing like what mankind has created from all of this. And like I have a thing for city skylines too. So where I'm going with this is that a lot of this is a result of capitalism. You know, a lot of it is a result of capitalism, innovation, people wanting to do better, wanting to create more, just people flourishing in general. And that under the system that I would want to support, or that I used to support, I should say, that I wanted to support at the time, where all of this innovation would kind of die down. Because if you're basically putting everybody on the same playing field, who has to gain what? Like if you're doing this, if there's no incentive for you to go out and do a good job and you're going to get paid the same as the other person, and you're all going to be living in the same type of housing. I mean, look at government. Government gets our money regardless. There's no incentive for them to do a good job. And we see how government agencies are run. So if you put us all on the same playing field where, in a democratic socialist society, it's not really communism, but it's getting close to that where everyone's pretty much the same essentially. I mean, there's nothing to gain from that. All of that, like, I mean, if we lived in that type of society, um, you know, we wouldn't have, if we started living that type of society years ago, like we'll just say in the 20s or wherever, we probably would not be able to do what we're doing right now because, the free market and innovation has brought us a lot of what we use today.
Yeah. Um, my thing about it is a couple things. One, I kind of grew up at that tail end of the Cold War. So I was taught all about communism, especially from Russia. And what you did not see from that was they all lived in squalor. And the only people that had that money was those in government and those connected to government. I I don't want to live in a society like that. Now, I fully understand that we need some sort of social net. You got to have something. So that's where my classical liberal brain kicks in. I don't think we need a universal healthcare. Two reasons. One, I see how the DMV runs, and I know how the VA runs. No, but I understand people need something. They need that help. There are people that aren't capable or haven't been able to acquire to be able to fully implement into a free society, and they need that help. I've never understood why we just could not expand Medicare and Medicaid. You already had a system in place to help those of need. All you had to do is expand it. All you had to do is take away some of the standards that helped qualify you for it and expand that to those who needed it instead of trying to force one style of healthcare across everybody.
Yeah, I've always been kind of an abolitionist. Well, not always, I suppose, but for my adult life at least. As far as like a safety net or whatever you were saying, I again going back to being anarchistic and free market. I'm a firm believer that people would give to charities willing like that. I mean, how much money did Bernie Sanders just get raised voluntarily? How many millions of dollars from people who think it's impossible for charity to work? Like, you guys just gave to this because you want those things. If you want those things, why don't you give to those charities? That'd be millions of dollars to cover for all people who can't, cover their own medical debts and stuff like that. And that's just free voluntary association. I just really, I don't know. I'm not much for mandates or anything like that. Obviously, going back to the mask thing, including mandating paying for really any type of government program. I think the government would work best if we funded it like a GoFundMe.
Trevor, I'm glad you pointed that out because this is something that I think um, that libertarians should definitely touch more on. And I think it's an attitude that society in general should change in regards to people that actually are in need because libertarians, we always talk about how that, people being voluntarily helped through charities, like you said, and through other individuals when they need it. But we've created a society, and I mean, it's been like this for years, where if somebody asks for help, they're lazy, they don't want to do the work, they're bums, they're asking for a handout, regardless of what the situation is. But it's practically normal for you to go to the government and get help. So basically, we've created a system where it's practically normal and perfectly fine to go to the government, but to go to something other than the government, it's just completely impractical and it doesn't work. And I think that's something that we kind of need to veer away from because otherwise people are going to continue to think that the government is this almighty God that can provide for them efficiently, and it's not.
Right. It's basically a nanny state. The left. I heard an analogy once that I kind of liked. The left basically views the government as a mother who needs to nurture and take care of her citizens, whereas the right views it as a father who needs to, enact law and order and discipline. So, yeah, I think you're completely right on that there. And again, though, back to what I've always was saying earlier. That it's really a battle of hearts and minds more than it is a voting booth. It's completely in people's minds. What you were just saying, it's mental. There's no difference between if I'm unemployed now and I go to a charity that helps people who are unemployed that have, say, kids or whatever. They help, give you a little bit. That's Why is that any different than me filing for unemployment? Other than the fact that if I went to the charity, it's people who willingly gave to it, not my neighbors who it was taken from to give to me. Why is that any more virtuous to go to the government who takes it from people rather than people willingly donating?
Because the roads.
Because my roads, dude.
Don't even get me started on roads. Um, don't even get me started on roads. Government, people who act as if roads would not exist without government have no idea about history because it wasn't the government who started roads and it wasn't the government who started public transportation. It was business owners.
I'll never forget I think it was my freshman. It was my freshman or sophomore year when I was in community college, and my U.S. history. I had him for I can't remember which one of his classes it was that I had. It was U.S. history 1 and 2. Anyways, he was one of the best teachers I had throughout college. He was an eccentric guy, but he was pretty cool. But he was asking us a question about why do we have taxes, and one of the students literally came out and said because the roads won't get fixed and stuff. And I literally had to put my hand over my mouth to keep myself from blurting out my roads because I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. It was literally one of those situations.
That's why it's so funny. That's literally an argument that people will bring up. Well, what about the roads? Well, I mean, I don't know. If I have a business and I want customers to get there, you think I'm just gonna make a business, have a parking lot, and then be like, well, shit, no road to get anyone here. Get, gotta pack it in.
Nah, I mean, the government didn't fully take over roads until we started building the highway system. Up until then, it was all local, and I mean, you still had, if you wanted your business connected to the main road, you got to pay for it. A lot of places still do that. Not here. Here, I can't
What
even get them to fix a pothole.
what's so crazy when I think about the roads is, and this is a true story. The very first time I went to Louisiana was I was 2010. I was 15, and when you're leaving Jackson, Mississippi, you get off to go on this interstate, like you're going to Macomb, Mississippi, and Macomb is like completely on the opposite end of the state from where I used to live. It's pretty close to Louisiana. It's like you're going to Baton Rouge. Anyway, so when we got this interstate going to go that direction, it there's basically you were it's like they have, what do they call, basically you were like a wall of construction, like they were doing construction on the roads, and it was that way for a good hot minute, and it was like that every single time that I'd gone down to Louisiana for like an 8-year period, and I'm just like, what the hell, why is this not done by now? So the most recent time I went, which was 2018, I was driving and I got off that exit, and I'm looking around like, did I make the right turn? And after 8 years, they finally got it done. And it cut my drive time down going down there by 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad they finally had this done. It only took you almost a decade to do. But I mean, I guess, you got to finish at some point. It just blew my mind that it took that long to get that done.
Well, they always take that long. The longer it takes, the more money they take out of taxpayers.
Good point.
That and a lot of the companies that are actually doing the roads have some sort of tie to somebody within government.
Hmm.
I mean,
Makes sense.
the Department of Defense budget would be a lot smaller if we'd get rid of senators' kids who are in between from the government purchasing an item.
We could just not pay senators six figures too. That'd be great.
Well, I kind of think we need to get back to where everybody has a say, because at one point in our elected officials, it wasn't just a bunch of lawyers, it was everybody. So now we got a bunch of lawyers who just go put a bunch of 1,000 pages into a bill and nobody knows how to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was never supposed to be a career either. It was supposed to be something on the side you did, political office. It was not, this is my career, this is what I do.
Well, like, especially from the aspect of the federal. Locally, I mean, it wasn't a career, but they were a full time servant. Whereas from a federal aspect, they only met once or twice a year. They didn't go spend months at a time in DC. They'd go home. They'd talk to all the people that they were there to represent, and then they'd go up there for a couple weeks and then come back home. And it's not like that. I mean, richest areas in this whole country are right outside of DC. There's
Yeah,
something
it's not
wrong
a
with that.
coincidence. Yeah, it's not a coincidence either.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's wild to think about, like all the extra benefits that they get too. by just simply being members of Congress. And it's, I mean, you think about all this money, because we have what, 435 House members. They all make six figures. Um, I think it's like what, 125,000 a year or something like that. Um, I know it's somewhere in that general range. I can't remember the exact figure. And I think senators, it's like 150 or 175. But it's, and you think about all that money that's spent, and do they, and one of y'all can probably verify this, even after they get out of office, don't they still get like some type of benefits afterwards? Or, uh,
It depends on what their position was, and it really depends on what committee they sat on and how high they sat, is where that breaks down. Most of them financially don't still get a paycheck, but they still get some sort of like health the rest of their life, which extends to their immediate family.
mhm.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I
I mean, you
mean,
don't,
you're telling me that a senator's kid who's 30 gets benefits because his dad's a senator, yet the average Joe can keep their kid on their insurance or 26, and then they're automatically gone at 27.
yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I have my own health insurance, thankfully, which is pretty good. But it's just, it's wild to think about, because I mean, it's like basically, you lose an election, your constituents fire you essentially from your job, but you still get to keep your benefits. Like that, that makes no
Well,
sense.
I mean, it's like Mitch McConnell here. He's been there my whole life. I don't want him there. They keep putting idiots up against him, and it's hard for me to vote for the idiot when the only purpose they have is to get Mitch McConnell out. And I have lots of reasons to get him out. He does not bring anything back to Kentucky. The only thing he brings back for money wise all goes to Louisville, and that's it. Well, Louisville doesn't need the help that much. Eastern Kentucky needs a lot of help. I mean, you've closed down so many mines. There's so many people out of work, yet you keep bringing federal funds into this state and only dumping it into Louisville. Come
Is
on.
he from Louisville?
If you're gonna do that type of stuff, spread it out. Help those who actually need it, not just a more self-sustaining area.
Hmm. Yeah, he definitely needs to go. But like you said, I mean, I think what the last person that went up against him was Bevin,
No.
or
The last person who went up against him was, I can't remember. I know one of the people that tried to go up against him was Ashley Judd.
uh,
That,
no.
that was weird. And then they found out she didn't even actually stay in Kentucky. She lives in Tennessee. Right now
Yeah.
they got McGrath, and she lost to the last person she tried to run against. Now she's going to try to run against McConnell. It
Because I thought that
it
Bevin
makes no sense to me.
ran against McConnell in the primaries one time, but maybe I'm not
Well,
sure.
in the
Regardless,
primaries he did.
hmm,
In the primaries he did, and he lost. I didn't like Bevins either. Even though I really do think that we need to get away from being a Democrat governor here, especially the son of the guy who emptied out all the pension funds. He was the wrong one.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean Bevin only lost because he was basically baby Trump, where he was very inflammatory with how he spoke and everything, and he pissed everybody off, and because he barely lost. So if he had actually chilled out a bit, he'd probably still be there.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because the AG is going after all of Bashir's mandates, and Bashir's not really crying, but he's complaining about it. And I'm like, he's just doing the exact same thing that you did to Bevan. What's the difference?
Yeah, I think Daniel Cameron's going to be. I think he's going to be good if he gets into another position of government, like if he's a senator or governor or something.
I think he would be a good replacement for McConnell. I honestly think he'd be a good replacement for McConnell because even though even though that they would lose those senior positions in federal government, I don't think there needs to be any of those senior positions. And even if you put in a junior representative in there, we still have Rand Paul, who would become the senior. And with Rand Paul being the senior and Cameron being the junior, we could see a lot of change versus it being McConnell and him being an establishment forcing Paul to sometimes shut up. There's times where McConnell just won't allow Paul to push his ideas out into the mainstream.
Doesn't surprise me.
Trevor's just Trevor's just sitting there.
Oh, I just got a couple of screaming babies, so I have my mic muted right now. Is all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like right
Well,
now, it's crazy. I don't live in Mississippi anymore, but I guess I talk about it a lot because I understand, having lived there all my life, I understand the climate of how it works better than I do anywhere else, which is only natural. And just what's so aggravating to me is that, like, so, which I can't stand Roger Wicker or Cindy Hyde Smith. Like, so last Senate election, I think I may have told you about this. So, Thad Cochran, he retired and he was one of those career politicians. He'd been there since like the 70s. And he almost lost his primary race to a guy named Chris McDaniel, who was like, I wouldn't say he's libertarian, but he was one of those limited government conservatives that you hear about. But but anyway, so Thad Cochran retired, and Phil Bryant, who was the governor, put in Cindy Hyde Smith in his spot, and she has just been like, she's basically a yes woman, is what she is. Because last election, she was at this gathering in Tupelo. Some person was holding an event for her, and she had said something towards him, like saying that I would go to a public hanging if he invited me, and as a politician in Mississippi, you just can't say something like that just because of how the climate is. Because I know hanging people isn't historically a racist thing. Like, it's not. I mean, it's been around for years, but like, what I mean is, what I mean, it's not historically targeted towards black people, because it's used years before that. But the way people treat it in Mississippi, both black and white, is pretty much that it is a racist thing towards black people. And that's kind of one thing from outsiders don't really get that. But as somebody that was spent most of his life there, it's one of those things I see. So she got flack for that. She never apologized for it. And then when the debates came up, the state Republican Party and Phil Bryant, from what someone told me, like, they pretty much tried to dampen down as much coverage on that debate as possible. Which the guy that was running against her, Mike Espy, he was in the Clinton administration, and he got in trouble for a bunch of corruption junk. So he's not a great candidate, but still. And after the debate was over between the two, Roger Wicker, who is the senior senator, took questions for her. And I'm like, okay, so are you running for 2 seats, dude? Or like, what's going on here? And she won handily, but it's like, and especially after the way they voted and with that whole FBI search warrant thing, it's just crazy. It's, nobody's holding them accountable for it, and they're going to be in there as long as they want, because it's, like, at least Kentucky, I mean, you guys have, I know you don't like them, but you guys at least have a Democratic governor. So there's at least some kind of parity there. I mean, in Mississippi, there's none. I mean, I think I haven't checked because I haven't kept up with the state offices as much as I did, but I think pretty much about all of our state offices are Republican controlled. I know both houses of our state legislature, I say our like I still live there, but both houses of state legislature have been controlled by Republicans um, since 2008, and nothing has changed. So it's like Republicans have had control of everything for over a decade, and people's solution is to still, but they don't see a problem, so their solution is to still keep doing the same thing. But yeah, I veered off topic a little bit there, but I had to complain. So
I mean, that's more or less what I was saying earlier. They feel comfortable. There hasn't been any real change, but they feel comfortable. Their people are in charge. I kind of grew up a little bit spoiled here because we are, from a federal standpoint, we are red as can be. And I don't fully agree with that. But as a state, with our state politics, we do have some really blue cities, and in between is blue, but the breakdown of it is very purple. So even though the governor has been predominantly a Democrat for 100 years, the breakdown of the representatives has been a good mixture, but they do too many stupid things like paying farmers not to actually farm. So we don't have any actual GDP increase. And it's like, we're a farming community. Why are we paying people not to farm?
yeah, it's kind of counterproductive.
Subsidies, I'm guessing.
Well, they started that with the whole, it was the whole thing that I was saying about the health department and all that. They started it simply because they wanted people to not smoke as much. So in order to do that, they just paid farmers to not produce tobacco. And the farmers have never switched. So we just pay them not to farm.
It doesn't even make sense. Why, rather than that, why wouldn't you incentivize them farming something else just instead?
Bingo. Well, that's why I like Paul, because Paul was the one who helped push the hemp through. He had to take McConnell and drag McConnell into the conversation to actually get it done. But that's how hemp and CBD became legal in Kentucky. And a lot of those farmers are now switching over to it, but they've made it to where there's so many regulations around it. It's not a free for all. It's only select individuals. And I don't like that aspect either. It should be, hey, if you want to grow it, grow it. Now, we got to make sure there's no THC content in it. But outside of that, it doesn't matter who grows it. And we can get people off of just sitting in their house collecting a check from the government. Put them to work.
Yeah, with incentivizing, that's kind of how that's because like the left solution to everything and is raise if they don't do what we say, let's just raise taxes. Because there's somebody that a friend of mine back in Florence, Alabama, which is where I got my bachelor's degree at University of North Alabama, somebody that I'm friends with on Facebook, he knows someone who's running for mayor, and he's like far left. And he basically he's like, every time UNA raises tuition, raise taxes. I'm like, okay, first of all, that's counterproductive because if you raise taxes, they're going to jack up tuition even more. So rather than raise taxes, why don't you incentivize them lowering tuition through tax incentives so that way they actually are, I guess you could say, motivated to do so? Because if you make them pay more taxes than what they already do, any entity you make pay more taxes, you're just going to drive costs up even more. And it's such a simple concept. I don't understand how people don't see it. I mean, if more people understood that, there is so much more we could get done.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the same concept with tariffs, which is what blows my mind when all, these people are, oh, Trump's sticking it to this country with their tariffs. It's like, you guys, all they're going to do is raise their prices to account for the tariffs. We're the ones who pay for it.
I try to tell people that all the time. When it boggles my mind when I hear, well, we're just going to raise prices on China. Well, but that doesn't open factories here. It just increases the product cost. And the
Right.
product already is garbage and falls apart in a year anyways. So it doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. You're just making it more expensive for the consumer. You're not punishing China. They're still going to get their bottom dollar.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's where things. I mean, rent in Nashville already. Even though I'm leaving, hopefully leaving in a few months, the Nashville City Council just recently voted to raise property taxes by 34%, and and rent's already high in some areas as is. Granted, compared to some of your other major cities, it's I guess you could say low. But I mean, that's just going to drive the rent up of some of these places as well, and um, sending people it's crazy. And I wish more people could see that that's a big, not the only reason, but it's a big reason why rent costs are going so high up. But it's the same thing with in regards to people don't understand the whole, if you raise taxes you're just going to make things worse in other areas.
I mean, there's a reason. It's hard because we have this concept that trickle down economics is what built the middle class, and that's not even accurate reality. Factories, factory workers, and to a point, the unions helped push in the security and the safety within our factories, but it was our factories that made our middle class. We were buying our own goods. We were shipping our own goods. We were utilizing materials that were from us to build our own goods. Middle class has gone down ever since we just started buying from all these other countries. The minute we switched over from being a self sustaining community to being a worldwide consumer community is when our middle class started to go down.
Yeah, we really don't produce anything here anymore. I mean, we produce some things, a very, very small fraction of what we consume, though. For the most part, all of our money goes elsewhere.
Hmm.
And I mean, we
Yeah,
can't,
I
of course,
mean,
we can't produce everything here, but there's a lot that we could be producing here that we aren't. But the root of that problem comes again to regulations, business taxes here, stuff like that. If you make it more expensive to produce here, well, then of course I'm going to go move my factory to Mexico or to China because I don't have to pay that much.
yeah. Well, a lot of the factories are going over to India and China and stuff like that simply because they have lower standards in how they pay their workers. Um, for some odd reason, you have a lot of not factories, but a lot of businesses going into Ireland and paying less taxes there. That's crazy. I mean, they're not building factories. They're just using it as a central location to avoid paying taxes.
Yeah, and that's why. Go ahead, Trevor.
Okay, Yeah, that's just the incentivizing things, though. Again, I mean, we could have that happen here. We could have people moving here. The problem is we tax everyone through teeth. We tax everything. We regulate every part of production. You're taxed when you're producing. You're taxed when you're manufacturing. When you're shipping. You're taxed when you're selling it. I mean, you can only tax so many times where people are like, okay, you know what? This is not making me what it should be making me. I can go make more over there. So that's what I'm going to do.
Hmm?
Yeah,
I
one
mean,
of
it's like the whole roads conversation. The aspect of the government needs taxes to pay for the roads. How many roads are fixed? But there's a $1 tax just for roads in every gallon of gas. You're telling me that is the whole country, we don't have enough taxes already built up to fix all the roads? Yet it increases every year.
what I always bring up to people in regards to with taxes. I mean, you just look at kind of the where people in the country are migrating to. Um, like if you look at some of the states that top states that people are going to, they're going to Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Washington. Some people are even they're up in New England or even going to New Hampshire, maybe other parts of the country and whatnot. You know what the one thing all those states have in common is? None of them have state
No
income
state
tax.
tax. Hmm.
And I mean, for example, like that's what Elon Musk, he's been so frustrated with everything in California. He's been looking at moving, Tesla, his headquarters in Tesla, uh, to outside of where is his headquarters? Is it in Palo Alto? I know it's in Silicon Valley, but um, yeah, he's talking about moving it to Austin, Texas, because of all the regulations that are in California. And so many people don't realize is that people are leaving some of these higher tax states to go to states where there's less because it's just easier to do business and it's easier to create jobs. I mean, even here where I live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is right outside of Nashville. I haven't even been here a full 2 years, and Franklin itself has grown a lot in a short time that I've been here. And there are people that are moving from all of these higher tax states. Like when I worked in retail banking for 7 months here, I mean, I met several people that were from New England that came down here. Weather had part to do with it, of course, but the other thing was that it was cheaper to live here and buy a home, etc., than it was up there. So,
But
I,
uh, movement has been going on for a long time. And yes, those particular states right now are seeing huge jumps in people moving to them. But a lot of people have moved out of New York. A lot of people have moved out of California throughout my whole life. Now, New York, they moved from New York because taxes were too high. They moved to Jersey. They voted for the exact same type of system. They moved again because taxes got too high. Then they moved to Pennsylvania and taxes started going too high. People have been moving out of California for years, moving to places like Colorado, and now taxes are getting too high. If you're going to move, you
Mhm.
can't sit there and move based on, well, taxes are too high, and then vote for the exact same stuff.
Yep. Yeah,
I mean,
that's a big thing of why people are saying there might be a chance Texas might could go blue is because they have a lot of California residents that have moved there
mhm.
and um, and to other parts of the country. Like you said, you can't go and keep voting for the same thing. Otherwise, you're just bringing the same policies you got away from with you, and you're defeating the purpose of ever having left to begin with. So
I mean,
yeah.
look at South Florida. South Florida for through the 80s was very conservative, mainly because of all the people who had left Cuba and had moved away from Castro, and they were very conservative. But then a ton of people left New York and went down to South Florida, and then they're going, well, we don't have a public bus system. Oh, well, we need a train system. Well, how come this isn't in place? And all that costs money. So South Florida taxes, even though there's not a state income tax, South Florida taxes and property taxes are through the roof compared to, say, Orlando, Tampa. And it's mainly because New Yorkers moved down there and jacked up the prices.
Yeah, I had some people that tried that said I should look into moving down to Fort Lauderdale, and like I mean, you compare prices of and which I mean, I'd want to go to Tampa regardless, but I mean, you compare Tampa and Fort Lauderdale, it's like it's insane how prices are. Not that Tampa property taxes are necessarily like the lowest in the country by any means, but they're
They're
definitely
not.
better than South Beach.
They're not. I haven't looked at them in a while, but the last time I looked, on average, Tampa for a $250,000 piece of property was probably right around $800-900 a year, and in Lauderdale it was like 2,300. And I'm like, wow. I mean, it's a huge difference in the same state.
In
Now, I don't know
Jersey,
what it is now,
yeah, in Jersey, if
but that was
because
like 10 years ago.
New Jersey currently, and this is something that was recent, if I looked at this correctly, in New Jersey, they have the highest property tax rate in the country. And I think if I'm not mistaken, for a $300,000 house in New Jersey, you would be paying $5,000 a year worth of property taxes. And I thought that was insane.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's just
it's definitely
that's
insane. I'm
crazy.
not even sure what ours is here, but I got some screaming babies. I think I gotta hop out, guys. Unfortunately.
All right.
Oh, no problem. Hey,
Well,
this has been fun.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
been very interesting. Uh, Glad to see the different aspects of minds, be able to have a conversation without just a bunch of talking points.
Right.
Um, I'm going to continue to be doing this, and I'd like to see you guys come back on another
Yeah,
Sure.
for
time. Um, I'll talk to you, Trevor. Have fun with those babies.
sure. Yeah, will do.
All right.